Hey others, how's it going, man? What are you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Sarthak? How are you?
Good, man.
Yeah?
Just living the dream.
Oh, yeah? I'm just watching one of Adithya Pai's videos.
Oh, I've known this guy for years. Me and him used to work together.
Okay.
Then a few years later, when I stopped working for that particular company, me and him bumped into each other at a motorcycle.
Oh, nice.
During our motorcycle course, and turned out we both have a strong passion about going fast in
Yeah,
motorcycles.
yeah.
And believe it or not, actually, because since we got together then, he was the one who actually helped me buy my first house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh, so I made a video with him recently,
good for you, man.
and another reel of his got like 250,000 views, and he's getting a lot of queries and questions as to how
Alright.
he's doing in his career and how he started off. So I was thinking of going and like just having a conversation with him, you know?
I have a feeling I've seen that video. Is
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
one about his car?
Yeah, that's all
All
about
right,
his car.
let's go get it, man.
Very humble. One of the most humble guys I know. One of the most sober guys I know.
Not the most honest people I know.
Yeah.
Not the most honest people?
One of the most.
Oh, okay, good to
One
know.
of the most. I do content. I'm a videographer. I'm a content creator. I'm with a mortgage professional. This is the wildest of crossovers that you can find on the internet. So, Aditya, what do you do?
Well, like you said, I'm a mortgage professional,
Yeah.
right? So, there's a couple of ways people can do mortgages. My way of doing things is I'm employed by a bank, so I work for Scotiabank, the Bank of Nova Scotia. I've been working for them for many years, and in 2022, I decided to take on fully the role of a mortgage specialist. So, in the way I do things, I don't really need a license. I'm employed by the bank, and I am representing the bank and its products, its mortgage products, and basically my job is to obtain all information from my clients, ensure all the documentation I receive is correct. I have done my due diligence beforehand before the file gets submitted in, and I ensure the ratios fit in. If there are any issues or challenges, we get ahead of them before the file visits an underwriter. My job in the simplest terms is to tell or rather tell the client story, make the underwriter and the bank see reason in the borrowing, and make the bank understand why this deal makes sense, why it is a good deal, and why the clients are a good set of clients to lend money for. But that, in a nutshell, in the simplest terms, is what I do as a mortgage agent. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool, man. Like I also wanted to ask you, so once you start working for your client, do you get a cut of the commission before, like, or after the deal is done?
So in my role, I don't really get paid till the deal closes,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it's in our best interest to ensure we work for the client as much as possible. Obviously, it's a fine line, right? You need to make sure you're doing right by the client. Yes, you don't get paid till the deal closes, but that doesn't mean you don't advise them correctly in terms of what's right for them, right? So we need to balance that. But in terms of whether I get paid before or after the fact, it's always after the fact, after a deal closes. And that applies to majority of mortgage professions, whether that is, and I think that applies to any real estate profession. If you're looking at whether realtors, mortgage agents, so on and so forth, even if you're a broker, for example, no one is really salaried. Everyone gets paid once the deal actually closes. Yeah.
So what made you come in front of the camera? Like, I've not seen you much on social media before, other than the couple of car videos we made together.
Well, to be honest,
Aditya.
it's and that was one of the most awesome videos I think we had. You shot that too,
Yeah.
and I think that one blew up. I got a lot of questions from that one, a lot of people reaching out, and that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to, explain my side of the story, because a lot of people reached out, on the phone or messages, text, Instagram, whichever method of communication they reached out, and they were asking more about my journey. They wanted to know or rather needed advice in terms of how they should approach this if they wanted to be in a similar role. So I've always been about helping as much as possible. And when people kept asking me more and more, I think in a week I started getting about 10 messages, and it started ballooning to a point where, I tried reaching out to as many as possible, but somewhere in between I wasn't able to do as much because I'm also balancing my full-time job, right? So I'm like, the best way to do this then is social media, because that's the best way you can have an outreach to the masses. So some of the questions that I couldn't answer in the first video because of the subject of the conversation was different, right? So this time it's a more focused conversation. So I feel we can address more of the concerns not concerns, rather more questions that people had, and can help them out that way.
Yeah, I remember that time. That time I would just join Vincity and everything happened on the go. And I was like, what's happening? I don't know what I'm shooting, guys. Can you tell me? I don't know what's going on. But yeah, that was a cool time. And since then we've got to know each other like pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get into more about the work side of your life, tell us about your journey here. What brought you to Canada?
Well, I came to Canada in 2014. I came to Canada as an international student, so I had some friends who've been, lifelong friends. Right from one of my buddies has been here since, been with me since KG. So we basically grew up together. We lived close to each other. Our houses were close by, and he moved to Brampton. And then, I graduated. I finished grade 12. I was doing my first year of BCom in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and I was looking at where I should go next in life, and I tried different things. It didn't really work out for me. I tried being a chartered accountant. Didn't really find an interest. I didn't really pay attention to it and flunked that. So that was one. And then I started exploring in terms of where I should go next, because I knew if I kept staying in a structure, I wouldn't really be able to, focus more. I spoke to my friend who is here in Brampton, and I had a conversation with him. I asked him how life is, and he was pretty supportive. He advised me, if you want to come here, just let me know. And then I one day just woke up and I decided, what, that's what I'm going to do. My parents, at the first time, weren't really happy about it, because they're like, you just got up and decided, you want to do this. I didn't even have a passport
That's it. I'm moving to Canada.
back then. Sure. So I was like, all right, I'm doing this. And my parents found out after, I believe, to a point where the visa was getting home. They didn't really know up till that point. So I basically went to, what do you call them? Those, not a travel agent, but the immigration agents or whatever. Consultants, yeah. So I reached out to one of them, and they basically helped me out with everything in terms of setting up my passport, helping me with my visa, my IELTS, so on and so forth. And before I knew it, in 4 months, I was here. And then it was just, culture shock as soon as I got here. It was totally different. What you see in the videos versus what reality is. I mean, now more so than before, but even back then, as soon as I got out of the airport, I'm like, what in the world, where am I?
What culture shock are you talking about?
Well, everything was different, right? I had never been out of India before then.
Okay.
So when I landed here, as soon as I got out of the airport, everything's much bigger, right? It's right from the weather to the people to the buildings to even the vehicles. Everything is different.
What is this place?
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 The way people talk, communicate. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still human beings in a different country, but it's just different culture, right? So it's getting used to it it takes a minute, right? So the first 3 months when I got here, I just wanted to be like, you know what, hell with this, I'm going back. But once I started getting adapted into that lifestyle, I started getting into it, got busy with school, so on and so forth. So that was about 2.5 years. Fast forward, while I was in school, though, this is important to mention, and this I think sort of shaped my career into sales, was I landed, and within a month or two after landing, I started working for Bell Canada. So it was a third-party company that worked for Bell Canada. They basically did kiosks. So they had, inside stores, they had retail kiosks, and through those kiosks, they sold what we call them as BRS, so Bell Residential Services. So like home phone, internet, and television. But the most challenging part, and me right from the beginning, I was an introvert. Still am to an extent. So what that job helped me do, and this is useful for anyone who is an introvert or has difficulty in terms of talking to random people, because sales needs that,
Yeah.
right? So the thing with that is it was a mix of commission and salary, right, or hourly income. Back then, I think hourly wage was like 10.75, $11 an hour.
Sure.
So for me, it was like, okay, I'm a student in school. I gotta pay rent. I gotta pay all my expenses, tuition, so on and so forth. So I'm like, if this job allows me to make a commission on top, and it was not like a performance bonus or whatever. It's you do this, you get paid this,
Okay.
right? So the objectives were clear.
Okay.
So basically, the first month I really couldn't do much because I was again scared talking to people. They're random people, going about. Can't really do much until someone comes and approaches you. You're not really talking to them. Second month goes by, same thing. Third month, I had my first sale, wherein I tried, and then another, then another, and then and that sort of helped me have that icebreaker in terms of now I can sort of make conversation. I can talk to people,
Got it.
right? That a year went by, and I was doing really well there. Then I moved into another sales role with now it's Freedom Mobile, but it was Wind back then.
You switch to Freedom Mobile and get Canada's most affordable unlimited data plans.
I was with Wind for about a year. Again, a dealer store. I worked on multiple locations. Again, did well over there. And then at the end, towards my retail sales career, I went into back to the Bell, the Source, which is now, I think, changing, is being bought by Best Buy. But back then, it was the Source, which was Radio Shack before that, right? So it was the same thing, doing Bell Residential Services, but with a much better income split. So I did really well as a part-time employee over there. In fact, I think I made more there before than when I moved into my full-time job with Scotiabank, which was working 20 hours. I think I made more than a full-time salary at Scotia, right? Which was insane, but
That's just an entry-level advisor.
So don't get me wrong, as an entry-level advisor, but the reason, and that's where banking comes into play, is I graduated. I had finished my course for accounting at Sheridan College, and then once I finished the course, obviously with any international student, the time clock sort of starts ticking, right? So you need to find what you're doing because it's the work permit, right? Like the daggers over your head. Now you have 3 years to sort of decide whether you're going to stay in Canada or you're going to go back, right? I, living the last 2.5 years and getting adjusted here, I decided, I think I want to stay here. So let's, get the work permit and decide where we want to go from here. I got the work permit. I transitioned to full time at the Source. The first year, I just, it was my fault. I took it a bit easy. Because I was making decent money, and back then, I can say it now, I think it was about 40,000-50,000 I was making there, with commissions and base salary, which was decent based on expenses back then, right? So
Single guy.
and I was living with friends too, so I was splitting rent, so it was low, right? So I was like, okay, life's easy. Didn't really have that ambition per se, right? So the first year just went by, then I had 2 years remaining, at which point I'm like, okay, if I don't do anything now, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to have to go back, right? So I started applying for jobs, and it was really hard back then. I think in around that time, the job market was a bit rough, especially for someone who has no experience in the finance industry, right? And I knew I wanted to get into banking. Like I was 100% certain I'm not going anywhere else. So I applied to a bunch of banks, and then nothing was happening. I applied at one point to CIBC, and at the same time I also applied at Scotiabank. It was funny because Scotia, the job that I applied for was in Windsor. So I do have my aunt and uncle that live here, and while I was visiting, I just saw this posting open. Like, why the hell not? Let's try and see what happens. And then I get a call from Scotia. They want to have an interview. I drove down to Windsor for an interview, and everything went out well. They're like, okay, we want to proceed with you. Then there was a bit of radio silence for a little bit. There's background checks and processes, so on and so forth. In the meantime, CIBC called me, and they're like, we want to hire you. You can start on this day. So I'm like, okay, I have a start date at one place. I'm still waiting for back check to clear on the other. And Scotia just went into complete radio silence back then. So I don't know if they were just having backlog or whatever. There could be a number of reasons. I started working for CIBC. That was the contact center. I think they called it inbound.
Contact center.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, outbound. Outbound.
Okay.
We were calling. Yeah,
Oh,
outbound.
you were calling out, so it'd be
Yes.
outbound, yeah.
So it was the office at, I believe it was Young and yeah. And then, me never having worked in that sort of a professional work, I'm like, holy crap, this is like really good stuff. Like I was feeling like a trader going there, but making still nowhere close to trader money. But I was like, oh my God, there's multiple screens. This is like, now I'm in Canada. I'm like feeling it. So then I go in there, get an understanding of the job. And once I started understanding it more and more, I'm like, I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah.
But again, I have to do what I have to do. I have to, work somewhere if I want to eventually live here, right? A week goes by, and I'm not really 100% for it. I can feel that I'm not happy.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking on what to do, I get an email from Scotiabank saying your background check's cleared.
Okay.
You can have this start date. And now I'm sitting there looking at two positions. One position saying you can live in Toronto, which is a pretty happening place. You have all the jobs here. You have, a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
On the other side, there's Windsor, but it's the type of job that you really wanted. And two, it pays decent. It pays slightly more than what CIBC was paying back then. And then, the big but there was it's in Windsor.
Okay.
Right, and I've been to Windsor a few times. I know it's a smaller city, much smaller than Toronto.
Yeah.
Back then when I moved, which was in 2017, there wasn't really anything here,
Yeah.
right? Like even the South Asian community was very minimal in comparison to what it is now, right? I just slept over it. The next day I woke up, getting ready to go to CIBC to work, and I just sat up from my bed and I'm like, no. I just sent an email saying, I'm so sorry. And it was within the probation period where either one of us can leave without notice. I sent an email. I'm like, unfortunately, I can no longer see myself working here.
Yeah.
I have decided to pursue other opportunities and I wish you guys well, right? And I decided to move on and I let that sink in. And 3 days later, I moved to Windsor.
You had your calling there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big decision. I was in almost the same place at, I think, just before I joined Win City. My thing was I should move to Toronto, Vancouver, or nowhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly I get a call and I'm like, there's an option and there's an opportunity in Windsor as well. It's a smaller place. I don't have many like-minded people around me. And I'm into filmmaking. I'm into the filmmaking community. I like watching films. I like doing stuff with films. But there's no one here. Like, so how is it going to help me? And then turns out all these businesses here need video. And I was like, maybe it's a good thing for me. Let's go try it out. And I'm still here. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper to live here, guys.
100%. And that was...
It's like 3 times cheaper to live here.
Back then in 2017, that was a big piece of me moving here.
Yeah.
So when I moved here in 2017, I lived with my aunt and uncle. They supported me for about a year and a half while I was living here, which I'm grateful to. And that was one of the reasons I was able to buy my first house, right? That helped me save up for the down payment. So in 2018, I bought my first house, being able to save up money. And back then, and I wish the housing prices were the same, but back then I bought a townhouse condo. It was in East Windsor, the Forest Glade area.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the perfect house. It wasn't the best house, but it was my house, right? And I remember still, it was $148,000.
Wow. How much down payment did you need it for that?
My down payment for that house as a foreign worker was a grand total, including closing costs, I believe of $12,000.
Wow.
$12,000 down
With
payment?
my current salary, I think I can afford that. I wish housing prices were like that
Yeah,
right now, but
yeah.
I can see it kind of skyrocketing.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it's. I wanted to ask you this since I'm just 24 right now, and I want to be able to own a house by a year or two, but my salary doesn't support it. And do you think there'll be a change in the housing market? Because I'm seeing average home prices here are $500K, and I was like, okay, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, follow-up question to that. You said you were an employee before and now you're completely into sales. So what would you advise someone like me who is an employee right now? And of course, I'm just waiting for my PR because my job is more inclined towards freelancing. What would you advise someone like me who's getting into freelancing? How am I going to get my mortgage approvals? How is stuff like that going to
It
happen?
depends. It depends on the kind of structure you take,
Okay.
right? And talking about your first question about
Yeah.
the housing prices itself, which brings me into the segue of my house when I sold it.
Got it.
So yes, I bought my house for 148,000, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
this is when Windsor had just started touching growth. It hadn't. It had flirted with growth in the past, but it never really got anywhere. So the housing prices in Windsor, I believe from 2000 till
Yeah.
about 2016 was
Okay.
flat,
Yeah.
right? I personally know someone that bought their semi in the South Windsor area for about $120,000.
Sounds about right.
121,000
Sounds about right,
actually.
yeah.
The funny part is they bought their house, I believe, in 2014. The original owner of the house bought the house in 2001 for 100 and the original owner bought it for 121. They bought it for 120. So they got it $1,000 cheaper after the first person owned it for 11 years.
Okay.
At that time, it was a completely different market.
Exactly.
If the house, if the seller was asking for, let's say, $100,000 for the house,
It would
if
go
you
below
ahead,
ask.
It would always go below asking. Going above asking was not a thing until I want to say 2017, 2018.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I bought my first house, it was a situation of being above ask. When I bought my house in 2018, when the thing had just started. So it was listed, I believe, for 129 and I offered 148 and I got it. Fast forward, I believe 2 years, I put in a bunch of work in the house. First year it was a struggle. I mean, back then I was making, I believe, $40,000.
Okay.
And even then, that's 4 times my income that I
Yeah.
spent on a house. So obviously, it was a bit of a struggle the first year. But I kept expenses to a minimum. I try to manage as much as I can, cut out needless expenses as much as possible. And I pressed through the first year, and my income gradually increased. I worked hard. I made sure I knew what my objectives were. So I was like, okay, we're in as a trainee advisor. How do we move up? How do we move up? How do we move up? Once my base pay went up, I was able to do some renovations in my house. So what I did was I basically painted the whole house, got flooring done, electrical upgrades, put in 2 new washrooms. And then made it a smart home, so put in a smart thermostat, smart speakers, made it beautiful. And then I didn't do that from the intention of selling it.
Okay.
I wanted to live there, and my goal was, okay, I've spent about 10-15 grand in renovating this thing. I'm going to pay off the mortgage and just be happy.
Okay.
And the pandemic happened, right? 2020 came, and everyone's lives just changed like that, right? So the pandemic came along in 2020, and everyone's lives changed. And the 2020 was around the time when I did my renovations too. The housing market completely changed. Interest rates changed. A bunch of things happened.
My body changed, man.
It did affect our personal lives. It did affect the financial markets, so on and so forth. We fast forward into 2020 was also when it played into a segue in me being a mortgage specialist, because in my mind it was that the pandemic's here, the markets are bad. No one's gone through this in the last 100 years. The last time it happened 100 years ago, lots of people lost their lives. There was a big impact on finances, and it took time for people to recover from it. So obviously we have much more advanced science, so on and so forth. But taking that into consideration, what can I do to ensure I come out better on the other side of this? So in my mind, the first thing that came, which never really happened, but the first thing that came to my mind was the bank's going to do layoffs, right? Which is very common for a business. They're going to cut expenses because revenue's fallen off a cliff, right? People aren't really buying houses anymore or anything like that. I think April 2022, I went about different realtors, brokerages, so on and so forth, and dropped off a bunch of business cards, had a bunch of conversations, because I'm like, how do I drive business, right? And then in hindsight, I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, because if no one's buying houses, what a realtor is going to do, right? Like, that's the reality of it. But in my mind, I was trying to just do as much as possible to just be employed, I guess, right? So a month or two goes by, and the market starts picking up. That's when interest rates got cut, and I get the first phone call from a realtor, and they're like, I saw your business card here. Do you do mortgages? I'm like, yeah, I can help you out. And they had a complex situation. I helped them out with it. And, we closed successfully, no issues. Then another one comes in, another one comes in, another one comes in, another one comes in. And now it just starts building up because from that realtor, right?
What was your role at the time when you?
I was a senior financial advisor at that time. And I think at peak, I did about 27 to 30 million a quarter.
As a senior
Financial advisor.
in a quarter, you did. Wow.
And it took a toll on me because I think I was staying till 11 at night at times where I wasn't being paid overtime. But I liked doing it.
Yeah. For the people who don't know what a regular target for a senior financial advisor would be for mortgages, let's say, what would that be?
For mortgages, you're looking at in terms of just dollars. I would have to guess back then it would have been an entire quarter. A mix of everything would have been maybe 10 million, not just mortgages. A mix.
For mix of everything. So annual would have been, let's say, 40 million, including mix of everything.
Yeah.
And in a quarter, you did 27 million in mortgages. Wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot. I mean, again, that's not the only thing I was supposed to do. I was supposed to do mutual funds, X, Y, and Z, right? So, but that's just how the market was. It got to a point where people were just dropping off purchase agreements saying, ask him to do it, right? Like that was the situation back then. And it was scary because these guys are not pre-qualified. There's no pre-approvals, nothing in place. And people would just drop off documents and be like, do it.
Yep.
And they wouldn't even drop it off to me. It would just be at the front desk. They'd be like, direct it to Adithya and have him, do it. And I would just walk in one day. I would have 5 purchases. I'm like, what in the world's going on here, right? So then the market started calming down. And then, in the meanwhile, I did buy my current house. I sold my previous house for a profit, a pretty healthy profit. So I bought my house at 148. Like I said, I spent about 20 grand in renovating. So all in, I was 168,000 in it. I sold the house for a total of 380 when I sold it. I sold it in 2021 and I bought my current house for 400. So I went out from a condo, went into a freehold semi. I wanted a garage. And the funny part with me is, if you know anything about me, it's I live for cars. Motorcycles, speed, that's what I do.
Speed, talking about speed, that's how I met you, actually.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
motorcycle passion there.
Yes, we did.
I've been holding off a cool video with you for
Yeah.
a really long time.
Yeah.
But I'm getting a new piece of gear.
Hopefully.
We'll do it.
Hopefully.
We'll do it soon.
For
I
sure.
promise.
I saw the house and I didn't really look at the house. It was funny because the realtor at that time I had, I'm like, does it have a garage? She's like, yes. Okay, buy it. I'm like, do it. So she was apprehensive because she's like, you've not seen the house. I'm like, I don't care. You've seen it? Okay. Would you live in it? Yes. Okay, buy it. I'm like, no, you need to see the house. I'm concerned. So then I go and see the house. It's a beautiful house.
Yeah.
A couple living there, a young couple. They've maintained it really well. Like, I don't have any concerns. Let's go ahead. Ended up buying it. So end of the day, for 20 grand more, I ended up getting a garage, freehold, no condo fees. A much newer house. My older house was 1975 built.
Yeah.
Then this one's built, I think, 03. So jumped a bunch of years. Which, to answer your question earlier, it's the first house is always going to be the hardest.
Okay.
Always. Okay. But that first house builds your foundation to get into the real estate market.
Got it.
Right? So the first house is never going to be easy. And in terms of how your mortgage would work, it would depend at that time.
Got it.
Because we'll have to base it on facts and figures we have in front of us at that time. But again, based on the information we have at hand, we try our best to help you out in the best way possible. Right? And then once I bought this house, I was like, okay, this house is here. I sold my previous house. I have a good, fallback, but I also wanted to grow at the same time. At that time, there was a split decision, and it was funny because at the same time, all of this could have happened a year earlier because that is the first time I heard about Adithya Soma.
Oh yeah.
Right, so I heard about Adithya Soma when a lot of clients came to me and It's funny actually because a lot of clients came to me and they're like, "Oh, our realtor is Adithya Soma. Have you heard of him? Have you heard of him? Have you heard of him?" 4, 5, 6 times. I'm like, "Who the hell is this guy? Like, come on, man!" Because I was getting flack because of it. So when I would call brokerages and ask for any kind of information, because we're required to sometimes call, ask for square footage of the property. If there's something wrong on the MLS, we reach out and they'd be like, "Are you the realtor, Aditya? We can't give you information." I'm like, "No, man, I'm not the realtor." But they would refuse to give me information till they have an official email from me. I'm like, "Oh my God, I got to meet this dude. Like, he's making my life hell." But
he came as a blessing.
So that's what I mean. This could have all happened a year ago, but it was just things weren't meant to be at that time. So the market slowed down a little, and in my mind, I was like, okay, I've been a senior financial advisor for a while. I've been a FA for so long, financial advisor for long. Let's try something different. And I've always wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to, learn the ropes of that. So I'm like, the only good way to proceed from here, if I want to ever own a business of myself, is people management skills. Till you have that, you can't run a business because the business is only as successful as the people underneath it, right? I decided to become a manager. So I applied for the position, interviewed, and I got selected at a branch on the east side, Scotiabank. And I became an assistant manager over there. I was doing it for about a year. And at that point, I was also doing mortgages, and I was doing quite a lot. And the branch at that time, when I joined it, wasn't really doing a lot of mortgages, and that was a sore point. And I love teaching people how to do it. So as much as possible, I was helping people learn how to do it. If they didn't know, if they had any nervousness with regards to doing it, I was helping them out doing it. By the time I left, our book grew by 400%. Because one, I cleared the apprehension as much as possible. Whatever fear they had, I addressed that, and then the book was growing. At that point, again, the market took a really steep nosedive in terms of real estate, where we saw interest rates peak up. The Russo-Ukraine war happened at that time, which led to higher gas prices. Inflation had started going up.
Which year is this again you're talking about?
This is 22.
22.
So prices in general had started going up. We saw, interest rates peaking, so on and so forth. At which point, my genius mind decided, the perfect thing to do at this point is be a mortgage specialist. It is the most stupid decision I could have made. But I was like, this is what I need to do. To which my mom, and I remember having that conversation, she's like, "Have you lost your mind?" My branch manager at that time exactly said the same thing, "Have you lost your mind?" And then a few other people exactly asked me the same thing, if I needed an admission to the psych ward at Windsor Regional, right?
So what was your biggest rationale? Because I assume being an assistant manager, you're making good salary. I'm assuming you're probably
I was well into the six figures.
You're making six figures already. And then you decided in a rough market that you're gonna just leave the 100,000 of the security, this comfort behind, and just basically start your own business in a way.
There was a turning point to it, right? So I was doing mortgages even as a manager, and while I was doing mortgages,
which is also unheard of actually.
You're not supposed to.
Not even you're supposed to. It's just most managers
Don't want
somebody
to,
who has worked in the financial industry as well. I've never seen a manager put a deal on. To be honest, the last manager I had probably didn't even know how to put a deal on. So, that's props to you for still, sticking with the plan.
The reason I was doing it was mainly because if I can do it, you can do it. That was the way
so
I wanted.
by example.
Exactly, because I'm like, the reason these guys are scared to do it, they're not sure if they'll get support if they do it. So I'm like, okay, let's lead by example. See, and that's what I would do. I'm like, okay, if I can do 25 calls, you can do 25 calls. If I can hit this, you can hit this.
You also touched up on how you worked overtime. You weren't getting paid for it, but you love doing it. It's your passion. So I wanted to ask you, how do you balance your passion and the pay you get for it? Sometimes you work so much and you get so little. Do you think there should be a balance for that?
There should be a balance for it. Now, I'm guilty of that, in terms of... I shouldn't say I wasn't paid for the overtime.
You work 24/7.
So when I was working overtime a lot, I shouldn't say I wasn't getting paid. I was getting paid, but up to a certain point, because it's not authorized overtime, right? It's not that the business or the bank didn't want to pay me. They would pay me, but again, they're like, there's a limit, right? Because there's laws in place to protect employees.
You can't
can't
work
just
like more
exactly
than 70 hours a week. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
But in my mind, it was also okay. I have a commitment to the client. I
Yes.
need to get this done, right? So I would stay longer. I would be like, okay, if I'm not getting paid, it's fine. It's my commitment that I made. It's not the bank's fault. They didn't make that commitment.
Yeah.
I did, so I'm going to honor that commitment, right? And that's what I mean. There needs to be a balance. But I was it was a high for me. I was enjoying doing it,
Yeah.
right? And that brought me into the segue in terms of where the mortgage advisor role sort of came in. While I was a manager, the mortgages took a little bit of a backseat, which is also where my network sort of started dying out a little because, again, I wasn't doing as much mortgages. And because of that, even my contacts were like, okay, we need to find someone else, right? But your network is your net worth. So I kept as much of it alive as possible. In the interim, it got to a point in terms of me doing mortgages where I was basically asked, like, do you want to do mortgages or do you want to be a manager? Because balancing these two is going to be really hard for you,
Correct.
right? You can't, your
Doing a
job
for
is
two
to
people.
train
You're
people.
doing a job for two people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes a personal toll. At the same time, it's also about, the bank's also like, how are you going to focus on training people more? Because that's the whole idea of this job. So I had a conversation with myself essentially, and I came to the decision that, if I don't try doing this, because I should have been a mortgage advisor about a year ago, and I pushed it off because it's a commission job, there's risks involved, so on and so forth. If I don't do this now, the rest of my life, I'm going to regret not doing this. I had, again, friends who supported me quite a bit. I had one buddy who works at a competitor, and he's been extremely successful. He is a mortgage specialist, and he motivated me quite a bit. Even another buddy of mine who used to work at Scotia at that time, he left. Now he works for a government agency, but even he supported me quite a bit. And all three of my close friends, they were like, if you like it, do it, because that's the only way you're going to know. If you fail, you crash and burn, but at least you learned.
Right. At least you tried it.
But if you're successful, you're going to be like, okay, at least I tried, right? So I'm like, okay, I just got up. I went to my manager's office and I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. I had a conversation with my now current boss. I had a conversation with him, Rory. I asked him, I remember that day I asked him, like, Rory, you've been with the bank so many years. I think it's over 12 years that he's been with the bank in this current role. And I asked him, I'm like, you've been through ups and downs of market. You've been through '08. You've been through, a lot of different stuff.
What's away?
The housing market crisis, subprime mortgage crisis.
Yeah.
And he's been through '08, and I basically said, what are your thoughts? Do you think I'm making the right decision? To which he said, there's never a right time or a wrong time. You start and you just do your best, and you let things fall into place, right? And that's what I did. I jumped in. The first 2 months were terrifying because there was no salary coming in anymore. It was completely commission based, and you have to hunt for business. And there wasn't much business to start with because the market had pretty much collapsed. December was a dead month. Like December and January is the slowest.
2022.
Because December in general is considered to be the slowest month for real estate. Everyone is in vacation mode. No one really wants to do
Holiday
stuff.
season too.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that.
Right. So what I did was I took December and I took a lot of advice from a buddy who was working for a competitor at the time. And I asked him, you've been successful. What do you do? And he basically said, if December is a slow month, it's a slow month. You can't change a slow month. What you can do is reach out to people, thank them for the business that they've given you, and look to communicate, And I believe somewhere around that time was when I sent a text message to Adithya Soma.
Okay.
Because I remembered him from back in the day, and there was another friend of mine who reminded me of him, and he said, hey, do you know about this guy? He's pretty big in Windsor.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him. At that time, I think he was expecting his firstborn at the time. Ahilya.
Yeah.
And I remember I messaged him, and that was the day she was born. So, congratulations. Obviously, don't worry about the meeting. We'll meet later down the road. And then, time went by. January comes by. Now, this was a crucial part of it. It's been 3 months. I'm making okay money, not really, barely even the same as what I was making before.
Sure. It would have been like really tough for you to go from a stable 6-figure
And that is the
to
biggest thing,
nothing.
right?
How
Exactly.
did you transition? Because I know a lot of people who are into jobs, but they want to become future business owners. They want to get into the freelancing market. So how did you challenge yourself? How did you change your mind? Okay, I'm gonna switch from this to this, and I'm gonna be okay.
It was a big risk I
Yeah.
took. To be honest, the way I looked at it is I need to have 6 months of savings, and I had that much in my account,
Okay.
and I had that. I'm like, okay,
So
that's
you need to do your due
exactly. You
diligence.
need to have your own
Yeah.
financial security in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so as for any business, you need
Yeah.
to one do something that we call as a SWOT analysis,
Yes.
right? You need to understand your strength, weakness, opportunity, threats.
Yeah.
You do that. On top of that, you need to understand where you financially stand today,
Yeah.
right? As long as you know where you're financially standing, you need to be able to commit to yourself. This is my start point. This is the point where alarm bells go ringing, where we need to understand. Okay, there's a problem,
Yeah.
and this is the point where we stop, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what's coming
Yeah.
up, you stop.
Yeah.
Right? So I reached to the point of the alarm bells in Jan, right? Because now it's 3 months into the 6 month savings, and I wasn't making enough, and I was basically at a split. So I had a good reputation within the bank. I still do, I hope.
Yeah.
But I had a conversation with the district vice president, and she offered me to come back if I wanted to. And at that time, she told me just let me know by X date X, for
Okay.
example, in Jan. And Adithya Soma replied at the same day, and he's like, let's meet on this day.
Yeah.
And I had a meeting with him, my boss, and me scheduled for 2 days after the deadline to move back into the branch.
Okay.
So one day before the deadline, I'm just sitting and contemplating what to do next, right? So it's one of the biggest decisions, because it's like, if I don't take this role, the risk is, they may not offer it to me again. And, I might end up in a position where I'll go through a lot of financial difficulties.
Definitely.
Or two, I take a leap of faith,
Yeah.
and I see what happens. And mind you, he's not committed me any business or anything like that. We're meeting probably for the first or second time.
Second
Yeah.
time. Okay.
Like, you know what? Like, we already decided if we crash and burn, we crash and burn. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I went to the meeting. I politely declined my DVP. I said, I really respect what you're offering, but
Yeah.
I need to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to regret not doing
Yeah.
it. Which, by the way, to be honest, Scotia has been great to me, which is one of the reasons why I've been as successful as I am,
Yeah.
right? Because there's been a lot of understanding throughout all these steps, which has helped me be where I am today, right? So I guess one part that comes in there in terms of how did you decide for moving from a salaried job to a commission job, the fact that the bank is so supportive
Got it.
in terms of when you want to try different things, that's what drives me to be able to take that risk.
Got it.
Because in back of my mind, I knew that, I'm good enough with the bank that if I wanted to go back, I'll find something. There is some sort of a backup plan, right? But if my employer wasn't as supportive, I don't think it would have happened.
100%.
Even now, it wouldn't have happened.
Again, your network is your network. You
Yes.
always have to maintain good relations with people no matter what.
Yeah.
So I think you did good on that
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
It worked out. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I did good. It's just
Yeah.
it's the environment as well within the
Of course, of
institution,
course.
right, which helps. But I went to the meeting with Adithya Soma, and we rest is history, is what I'll say. Along the road, I kept meeting a lot of different people, and which brought me into my other partners as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough, man. Aditya made a good gamble with me as well.
Yeah.
He got me on without knowing what I did before.
Yep.
Yeah. He was like, oh, Sahaj's friend. Okay, come in. I was like, hey, what? I was kind of skeptical. I was like, dude, you haven't seen like what I do.
Yep.
And then I was like, okay, let me show him what I can do. And then he was like, we're dating at this point of time. We don't know each other.
Yeah. And they're very good friends,
Yeah.
good real estate agency as well. So one of the two of the most strongest real estate agencies in Windsor now.
Brings
that I
me
deal
to
with.
another topic about gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen that the circle I'm around with over here, like with Wind City Real Estate, you, and now Sartha, people don't gatekeep over here. They don't gatekeep their thoughts. They don't gatekeep their ideologies. And it's turning out, it's helping everyone around. And do you think that you should be sharing all the knowledge you know outside to the outside world? And one more thing, on social media?
I think it's as long as the knowledge is correct, the
Yeah.
information you provide is correct. I think yes, it should be shared as
So
much
it
as possible.
shouldn't just be like a blind thing you do.
Well, grow together, right? At the
Yeah.
end of the day,
Yes.
because the way I look at it, and this is my ideology, and I've told him this quite
Yeah.
a few times. Imagine you're the richest guy, like you're making insane amounts of money.
Yes, one day, guys.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah.
But just imagine you're ultra uber rich,
Yeah.
right? And you have your own jet, you have your own cars, you have your own houses. What does that mean without having people to share that with? Like if you want to go on a vacation, you want to spend X amount of money, you want to do X, Y, and Z. If your friends are not able to do that with you because of their financial restraints, how are you going to enjoy?
Exactly.
Right?
We have to grow together to
The whole
enjoy
idea
life
is
together.
okay, you've reached a point in life. How can you help someone else get up there with you
Yes.
so that you guys can enjoy all together?
Yes.
Right?
For
So
sure.
that's the way I look at it, right? So whether it's Win City, whether it's Armani and Associates, both of those groups, the way I treat them is like family, right?
Yes.
So it's like, how do I bring in ideas to help them grow, right? So that's the whole idea. So whether it's a new realtor, seasoned realtor, top performer, someone who's just starting out, it's all the same to me because at the end of the day, I'm like, how do I help? If they've already grown, I'm like, how do I help them more to grow?
Yeah.
Or if someone's new and starting out, I'm like, how do I help this person out so that they can quickly get up there?
sure.
So it's the way I look at it. Whether that's just sharing ideas, whether that is providing them with information that could help them talk to a client, or even helping their clients out in tough situations. When and where possible,
Yeah.
right? So information sharing, even in terms of social media, there's a lot of clients that connected with me on social media through content, right?
Car videos.
Car videos, and I never thought that car video would blow up to the extent that it did.
250K.
Yeah, over 250,000 views. Yeah, so it blew up.
Yeah, $200 he's paying for this for $200.
That was a controversial video because
I know.
I got a lot of
We gotta
messages
do
from
that.
that. Yeah, so there is an explanation video for those that are waiting for that. Because a lot
You
of
mind
people.
explaining it to? the
Well,
people that-
I
or
would
it's
rather.
It's another topic by itself.
I would say it's another topic by itself because I would get an accountant in to explain it better
for sure.
because I'm not an accounting professional,
100%.
right? And I've told this to a lot of people that messaged me. I told them the same thing. It's that always a disclaimer. We're not accounting professionals. We're talking about our own personal life
We're
experiences.
not financial advisors also.
No,
Like,
I was one at one
Yeah.
point. I was licensed. I no longer am. But
I used to be one too. I don't know if you didn't know.
I didn't know that. I met you like now.
I was
1 hour ago.
Right, exactly. It was not an hour, but I was a financial advisor as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I met him.
Got
too.
it. Got it.
yeah, but I would. That's what I would say. And that brings me to the most important piece, which is misinformation. Social media is a great tool to spread information, but it's also a problem in terms of wrong information being passed out.
Exactly.
But I've seen a lot of content when I see it, I'm like, God, if CRA sees this, you guys are like destroyed. So you have to be a bit careful in terms of what you share. The most important thing that can be done is, talk to a professional, someone that's licensed. They pay a lot of money to get those licenses. They're educated. So, if they tell you something that's wrong, they have the liability to that information, right? Unlike someone who's just blurting out on social media, without educating themselves, it's a licensed professional wouldn't make that mistake, right?
It can ruin people's lives. I've seen
100%.
people's lives being ruined over here.
We actually had a coworker. We actually still in touch with him, Mr. Moore. He had one saying, the crap you take in will determine what comes out.
Yeah.
So if it's a bad input,
Yeah.
it's going to have a bad output.
Exactly.
So you have to do your due diligence before you consume anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in terms of days where I ever feel like is this the right thing for me? The best way to look at it is think about a day when something from that life gets taken away from you.
Yeah.
How would you feel? Right. That's the best way to look at it.
Yeah.
I didn't have my car for a week,
Oh, okay.
and
Big challenge.
when I didn't have my car for 1 week, and the amount of challenges I faced and the entire downfall that I had from it in terms of like I was really struggling to do my job. I was really struggling to do anything, right? But that car is part of that life.
Yeah.
Right? So it is part of what I do, and that car came because of that life. And now when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, no, I can't I can't. It's not just the money factor. Don't get me wrong. It's also the point that the car helps me get from point A to point B in terms of getting to my meetings, so on and so forth. And I thought about getting a rental and doing this, that, and everything. But it's not the same. You know, there's a way your life goes. And now that you removed one part of that equation,
It's a sudden switch.
It's a sudden switch, and I'm like, I can't do that. I need to get back to what I do.
Yeah. Okay. That was a great session. Man.
Yeah.
That was
Actually, I do have one final very important question here.
Sure.
What kind of music you listen to? What kind of music motivates you?
Oh, yeah. It's all coming together.
One of the artists that recently I've been listening a lot to is Connor Price. I don't know if you've heard about him, but I like
He's
his music
doing
quite a
big
bit.
things right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think? What song would that be, and why?
Well, if I were to think of the one song that I would that recently launched that I like the most is "Overnight" because it resonates quite a bit with what I do. Well, there's a line in that song, and it goes, well, people think that it happened overnight, but it didn't.
All bark, but they don't bite. They timid, thinking that it happened overnight, but it didn't. Ain't it for the long?